The robots are coming, but are we ready for them? I'm Jason Lowe. You can call me J-Lo, and today on AI Diatribe, we're diving deep with Ken Mills, president of Intelisys, one of the nation's largest technology distributors. Ken's journey from nuclear engineering to AI leadership gives him a unique perspective on what's real versus what's hype in today's AI landscape. Let's dive in. Ken, I read somewhere that you had previously worked in nuclear engineering, naval nuclear engineering specifically. Is that the truth? Is that accurate?
Yeah. Long time ago, I qualified as a nuclear machinist mate in the United States Navy and went through the nuclear engineering program in Orlando and Charleston, South Carolina. And it was a great experience and challenged me significantly academically and really challenged my lack of note taking in school when I thought I could do the same thing in the nuclear engineering program, and I was very incorrect and had to quickly become a very good note taker and a much better studier than I had been through school at that time up to that point. So I absolutely did, and I use a lot of those skills in my job today, believe it or not. So I really get a lot from it.
The quote unquote discipline will certainly carry over into your occupation for sure. I'll bet it changed your life in more ways than just note taking, though.
It did. And I'm glad I was able to serve and have a deep respect for those that served longer than me and those that gave the ultimate sacrifice and, so that we have the freedoms to do podcasts like this.
Hey, amen to that. Okay, well then after this, you moved into Bosch Security. You were doing some business development activities there. And then you launched the surveillance and IoT division at Cisco. Is that accurate?
I was the first salesperson in that group, Emerging Technology. So it was a business that hadn't existed before. And so they went out and hired a number of folks in that business unit. And I was one of the first people there. So we launched it from scratch. And I held a bunch of different roles throughout the organization, from sales specialist to channel roles to territory leader to all kinds of different things, and got to work globally as well. And it was a really great experience.
And then quite the jump to a CTO position with Dell. I mean, that's not just a little career leap. That's a big one, right? Was it a pretty large one for you?
Yeah, EMC first, and then Dell acquired EMC, and so I took over the role and responsibility at Dell as well. So yeah, I mean, I've always been a very technically minded, oriented salesperson. I strongly believe that if you're going to be in sales, you need to know what you're talking about and hopefully have a passion for the technology. And so that really allowed me to step into a role that I hadn't done before. And fortunately, EMC and then Dell gave me that opportunity and then ultimately let me be the general manager of that business. And we launched it and grew that from scratch, literally with three of us on day one to a global team across 22 countries 6 years later. So it was another great experience and a great opportunity I was fortunate to be a part of.
Wow. So you've had a perennial pattern here. Let's start small and grow big, and then start
That's right.
small and grow big, and
That's right.
and yet you jumped from big to big in this last jump. I mean, you were playing CEO at Epic IO, and then you jump over to be president of Intelisys. So how does that jump happen? I mean, you're now moving from something that's very security specific, very IoT specific, over to something that's much more broad and general. What made you head in that direction?
I've always been a fan of transformation and really helping, move a business forward, or to your point that you call out, kind of being early into a business, early into an investment. I was talking about AI for 10 years before it was the cool term it is today, and, selling computer vision and federated AI solutions and a lot of different technologies that we are all very excited about today as it relates to learning and all the things around Teslas, all the great stuff that's happening around us. That's been going on for 20 years, and I've been a part of it for at least half of that. And so what I saw in the opportunity in Intelisys is the TSD market, the technology solution distributor market, where we are the software cloud AI distributor for companies and partners that are really focused in that marketplace, allows me to help be part of the next transformation. I think if you look across the next 5 years, this market's going to be dramatically different than it was the last 5 years. And where we spent some time together, I think all of the players in the space are going to have to adapt and change to bring a new set of values to really flourish. So that has my name written all over it, right? Is how can I go build a new platform, a new solution, a new opportunity And fortunately, the team was excited about me doing that, and here I am.
That's great. That's awesome. So Intelisys is definitely a well reputed company. For those that are not incredibly familiar with them, where have you been? What rock have you been hiding under? No, I'm being a little more serious. They are one of the largest technology solution distributorships in the nation. Interestingly enough, when Ken and I met was when he was in his CEO role at Epic IO, and I happened to work for a competitor of Intelisys, and yet neither of us are at those roles anymore. And so we find ourselves having this conversation outside of that particular circumstance. But if you don't mind, I would love to go back and revisit things that were going on at Epic IO because you mentioned a few things very specifically how AI was really starting to be used in some great ways, especially as it relates to IoT, cameras, sensors, different things like that. And you had some great things going on at Epic IO. But I'm curious, in your mind, what were the one or two use cases that were just the most memorable for you? Or maybe it was surprising that they were so popular or so applicable. I mean, tell me a little bit about what the biggest impact things were for you when you were at Epic IO.
Yeah, so in the security space, which I certainly hold dear, having grown up in that space and held a number of roles focused on helping keep the world safer, and it's a great role to have, great technology set to be able to talk about. One the blocking and tackling of just using computer vision in a way to identify behavior or actions that are dangerous and be able to respond to those quickly and reduce the risk to property and life risk, as well as hopefully catch the bad guy, right? And so I loved working in opportunities where we were able to really make a difference and reduce hopefully crime or reduce fire risk, as an example. Be able to do early detection of fire using computer vision, or early detection of improper behavior at a electric substation that could result in lots of people being impacted, or crime throughout a city like gunshot detection, or improper driving like reckless driving and things like that, speed racing. So lots of these things can be used with AI to identify this behavior early and then act a lot quicker and reducing the risk for everybody involved.
Well, a decent amount of that has to do with person recognition. I know that when you were at Epic IO, we talked about this. You presented a use case that I found kind of interesting, and you did a demo of it at the time where there were cameras monitoring a warehouse or a workspace where it was keeping track of who people were and could tell if someone was an employee or wasn't an employee. And if I remember correctly, that was particularly interesting because there was issues with facial recognition. You couldn't use facial recognition anymore, or not as often,
Yeah.
or in the right ways.
Yeah.
You were doing more kind of person recognition. So to someone that's not in technology, that's just kind of a layman or someone that isn't into this all the time, how do you even explain like something like that works? I mean, what's going on behind the scenes with this
Yeah.
person recognition thing versus facial recognition?
Yeah, so facial recognition is kind of the obvious, right? You and I are looking at each other, and the camera can see us and say, "All right, that's Jason, that's Ken." But in a privacy-oriented setting where maybe you don't know who those people are, right? You don't have a identifier like a card badge or a license plate, or a driver's license or whatever to bounce that information off of. You may not have the ability to say that's Jason or that's Ken, or you may have a privacy posture that says you don't want to be able to tie the name to a face necessarily, but you do want to recognize a person as, hey, I've seen this person before, or I've seen this face before, or I haven't seen this face before in the case example you're using. And if I haven't seen this face before, I should probably check it out because this space is only designed for people I know. So in a sense, you don't have to do, hey, that's Jason or that's Ken, but you can say that the attributes of this picture indicate that this person's height and size and facial features are consistent with height, size, facial features of someone that I know. And if it's not consistent with someone I know, then I want to flag it. And then you get into the math of it all and saying, how accurate do I want this to be before I alert on it? Do I want it to be 100% accurate? Do I want it to be 80% accurate, or even lower, say 50%? And that accuracy rate will determine how often you get an alert that may be false positive or false negative. But you got to find that balance, right? Because the obvious, response is, hey, just make it 100%. I don't want to have any false alarms. I want 100% accuracy. That's the only thing I want to alert to. Generally, angle and obstructions like poles and cars and other objects, can trees and all kinds of things that just are in real life, that don't look quite as obvious as this image that we have here with you and I, really negate the ability to say I want 100% accuracy, or really make that impractical. So you got to kind of pick that sweet spot of saying, maybe 80% is good enough because then I can go look at the video, I can make a decision, or maybe I want 90%, or something in between, right? So that's where you want to get to. But what's unique about this is a project I worked on a long time ago for a major bank. We were doing a AI alarm based interaction, and we were talking about 93% accuracy versus 97% accuracy. And someone was like, well, that's only 4%, that's not a big deal. And
Only
only
4%.
and the bank person was like, well, sure, I have, 12,000 locations, 200,000 cameras. So that 4% is like 100,000 more events that I have to clear, and, some number of people that have to do that. And he's like, that 4% is enough to say that this is not a successful project. So, size and scale becomes a big factor. And that's what we're seeing today with AI, right? Is large language models to computer vision and robots and cars. That scale of that data helps really improve that accuracy, but also creates its own unique problem.
Well, and I'm sure that the environment itself is probably going to dictate what the higher accuracy needs to be versus the lower accuracy. Like, for example, in your nuclear engineering scenario, bad guys might wear costumes, that are like of
Yeah,
the same type of build and structure as somebody that actually
yeah,
works. They're walking around with a hat down really low and sunglasses, might be trying to pass themselves off as somebody else. Whereas if I'm in the back of, some retail shop, maybe it's important, but it's not incredibly important. They might have a little higher tolerance for those false positives, or maybe not quite as many notifications, I'm sure. But
yeah, yeah.
in the finance industry specifically, that's very pertinent. Anything as far as related to physical security, I'm sure is pertinent. Did you find yourself in instances where you were having to do things in conjunction with an actual physical security force?
But yeah.
Maybe kind of cover what they're not covering, do some serious coordination? And if so, were you partnering with some of these physical security firms, or was that something that you kind of coordinated yourself as a front man for that type of activity?
Yeah, I mean, partnership. I mean, um, Jay McBain talks about this all the time, right? Is in a big enterprise project, there's usually seven-ish partners involved in various phases of that decision-making process for a customer. And I happen to agree with him, right? There might be a consultant, there might be multiple competitors in there offering similar services. They might be a competitor offering one piece of service, you're offering another. There might be different software stacks in the mix. So there's always, more than just you and an opportunity. But yeah, we very regularly, and I would highly recommend this for anybody looking at the computer vision or AI space for safety and security, is you absolutely want it to be an and scenario for the security posture. So, one great example of this other customer is same kind of thing, identifying people that are on property that shouldn't be there. Well, to your point, sometimes they're smart and they may have stolen a company vehicle, or they may work for the company and be doing something they shouldn't be doing, right? So that identification alone may not be enough to say that there's a threat, but did they follow procedure? Did they check in on site like they're supposed to? And are they there the time of day and night that they should be? Are they in an area that they should be? You can create these policies that, in conjunction with the security force, you can have a much better response. So that way you're alerting them to say, hey, this behavior is outside the bounds. You can now make a decision as an operator, security professional, to say, do I want to dispatch or respond, or do I want to ignore? And that's why I think you're seeing a lot of solutions where there are people that are directly responding to that event. Like, so they're communicating down to that site, hey, I need you to verify yourself, or I need you to put in a code or give me a keyword to say that you belong here, in conjunction with the video alert. So again, it just depends on what your security posture is, and how serious of a space you have. And hopefully our critical infrastructure is taking it very seriously. So
Using AI and IoT with the equivalent of MFA, by
yeah.
making sure that it's verifying who you are with some other method.
Yeah.
That sounds
Very
rather
low
interesting.
tech MFA. Hey, you give me the code that you're supposed to be here.
Let's check your voice
Exactly.
print and make sure it's actually you saying the code, right? We could get a
Yeah,
little
yeah,
bit
all kinds
elaborate
of
there.
stuff you could do. Yeah, absolutely.
But I love the use cases, especially as it relates to, and one of the best ones that I think you told me about was let's make sure that things aren't catching on fire, especially on a
Yeah, right.
construction site where we're
Yeah.
looking for combustion or signs of heat, getting a little bit hotter in certain areas. That to me is a really compelling use case.
Yeah, I mean, we unfortunately have seen some really serious fires over the years, and sometimes they're intentionally set, and sometimes they're not, right? And the quicker you can get to it, the better in either scenario. One of the things I learned that really surprised me is, these huge mulch beds that you have for, let's say you're a city and you're gonna go do a whole renew of putting all new mulch out into your different trees and stuff in your downtown. You might get a whole bunch of mulch delivered and put in a parking lot, and because you're getting ready to go, and something happens and the team gets delayed or the temperature gets too hot and they can't go out there or whatever. But all of a sudden, this mulch pile surprisingly can start to combust and catch on fire on its own and get pretty out of control pretty quickly. How can you detect that maybe, quicker and reduce risk to the city or property or lives? Same thing in waste management, right? I mean, all of us have these great devices that we walk around with that provide us a ton of value, but when they break, we're over it, right? We have no use for it. So we toss it. And you may not think about it, but most of these devices have lithium batteries, and you put them in, you throw in your trash, and someone puts them in the back of a dump truck that came to your house and picked it up, or your office, and they crush it, and then they actually pierce that battery in the back of the truck, and it literally melts the truck on the way to the waste center, which is not good for anybody. Or the whole facility catches on fire because there was a battery or that they weren't expecting, and they couldn't get to it in time. So that timed resolution is super important, and you can use AI to speed that up.
For sure. I mean, there are so many use cases. I mean, it's just silly. All of the different things that you can do with IoT, whether it be computer vision or other things. Let's check and see if someone's vaping in the bathroom at high school. Let's do an audio sensor to
And they
see if,
are.
and they are for sure. Let's see if people are getting in fights down the hall, and if it sounds like there's a big ruckus, notify the principal that he needs to get down there. I mean, they're sensors to make sure that elderly people that might have mental issues like Alzheimer's or dementia or something like that are not getting out of bed and wandering around, but actually staying in their room. There are so many different use cases. It's fascinating stuff. And in my mind, and I'm curious if you agree with this, right now, today, amongst all of the different things that we're doing, I would say IoT is probably the most underutilized area of AI in the world today, where it can have the greatest impact with the least amount of investment and input. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, sensors have been around for 50 years or more, right? And machine to machine's been around forever, and that's what we called IoT back in the day. And relay magic, which gets one sensor to communicate to another and fire off an action, has been around forever. And now you're adding intelligence to that and predictive analysis. You can do so much more. I mean, there's a customer I worked on in at Dell and EMC where they were having a huge issue with roads being not salted properly in the winter, and they couldn't figure out what was going on, and they would have complaints that roads were deteriorating faster than they should, or when there was ice or snow, the roads weren't salted and they weren't safe to drive on, and they're looking at the logs and said, yeah, we ran the salt trucks, we did everything we're supposed to do, we have a crew, we bought all the salt, we did all the stuff, like what's happening. And so we put some mobility, some connectivity, some edge compute, some IoT sensors, very inexpensive, on these trucks, and measured where they drove. So GPS data, measured how long they were out, measured the salinity of the salt mix that was coming out of the truck itself,
Wow.
the amount of salt that was in the truck, from a weight perspective. And what they found is that the trucks, people make bad decisions, right? And it's cold, it's early middle of the night, they don't want to do it, so they're laying heavy on the salt drops, and so they oversalt the road, and they get done quicker, and they go home. But all of a sudden, that road 6 months later is a mess, right? Because the salt wreaks havoc on the asphalt and the road, and you're repaving it and fixing it much faster than you planned, right? And you're probably not salting the rest of the road like you were supposed to, and so therefore you have a dangerous spot, right? Or
Wow.
the more poor decision making individuals would go dump it into a ditch and not salt at all and then go home, right? And when they came back, the truck was empty, and so as far as everybody's concerned, it was done, right? So by connecting the sensor data and the GPS data and all that, you're able to build this story that's like, all right, that makes total sense what just happened. And now you can do some training and maybe hire some new people and improve cost, because you're going to reduce the amount of risk to your roads. You're going to reduce safety. You're going to improve safety. So just using simple sensors.
Man, it sounds like the
No
sensors are just,
cameras required, but still tells you the story.
yeah, it sounds like sensors are kind of there to save humans from themselves or to save companies from humans. It's just kind of
Well, people make bad decisions all the time, right? I mean, that's unfortunately the reality.
it's the reality of our species, I suppose. Well, one of the neat things about speaking to you specifically is that, yes, you do have all of this experience in the AI, IoT space and other areas, but now that you've flipped over to Intelisys, it's getting a lot broader and a lot more general. There are definitely things that you are seeing now that you didn't see when you were CEO of Epic.io that might speak to a little bit more of how AI is playing out in the vendor ecosystem and the partner ecosystem. What are some of those things that you're learning about? What are you observing that is potentially surprising or affirming compared to the past knowledge that you had or the assumptions that you had before?
Well, what's great about AI and IoT data in general is the use cases are expanding, right? And large language models are starting to play a role in IoT data and computer vision data and machine data, and being able to apply these really amazing models to data in a way that is even more robust than we were able to just a couple of years ago is unlocking whole new opportunities to interact with that data and ask questions of that data or create different models and alerts on that data. So we're seeing a ton of investment in infrastructure around all different use cases and types, whether it be agents and customer experience, to IoT data, to robotic data, to large language models for private use or coding or enterprise use cases. We're seeing a ton of infrastructure investment across our portfolio and across the country and many, many different use cases. So that's really caused a great explosion in cloud and consumption data that we can take advantage of as an industry, which is great. But we're also seeing a really, what surprised me is the mechanical side of technology is becoming way more important than it used to. Everybody say software is going to eat the world. And, when I was at Dell, Michael Dell had a great saying, yeah, software is going to eat the world, but it's got to run on something. It's going to run on a Dell server, right? So, I thought that was a great point that he made. But what's really interesting is all this AI is coming back around to robotics, and whether they're humanoid robotics or specific purpose robotics like a Roomba, robot vacuum or whatever, or farm equipment or so forth. But that opportunity of bringing AI plus code plus machine together in a single use case, I think is going to explode, to the point that I recently did a college tour with one of my children, and they have a degree now that is computer science, artificial intelligence, and mechanical engineering, and it's combined into one degree. And like, that's just crazy, right? That's even a degree track that you can do, and it just makes perfect sense as robotics are the next frontier.
Well, I don't think Elon Musk is playing around with X robotics for no reason. I mean, that's
Right.
all of
Yeah,
this is leading
Huawei and other competitors are, Boston Dynamics. Like, there's all kinds
bigger.
of good players in there.
Well, and it's scary to see some of the, I mean, we're only seeing videos, but it is sometimes scary to see some of the videos coming out of China. They have a lead, and it is not insignificant at this point. It's not like we're neck and neck. They actually have a little bit of a lead here. I'm certainly hoping that here in the United States, these companies are going to continue to work hard, and they are. I mean, some of the advancements that they've made, goodness gracious, at a X party or a Tesla party, Tesla Robotics, where they're serving drinks for crying out loud. I mean,
Yeah.
that's pretty formidable. Building cars in a factory for BMWs. I mean, those are some pretty great things going on right now. But I'm sure that there's probably a little bit of stuff that is hype versus reality as it relates to AI. But the thing that's not hype is exactly what you said. You may not have a use case right now specifically that you can address with AI because maybe the technology is not quite there yet, but you can prepare. And you mentioned that in really building up the infrastructure, data preparation, other proactive activities to make sure that when things turn around to where you can actually really grab that tiger by the tail and just go, that you're optimally set up. And that's interesting to hear you say that because I don't think there are enough companies that are really taking that seriously.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it ourselves, right? As we prepare for a number of AI projects internally to provide better services to our partners and suppliers, to provide lower cost services, to scale the business as we want, as we grow, all those things, we're looking at how can we leverage AI as a tool alongside our team to make us better and allow us to be more efficient. When you easily can say, yep, I want to do that, and you can easily see the examples where I'd like to deploy that solution from Klarna that they've done a great job with deploying AI in their infrastructure. Let me just do that with my data. And then the reality of, hey, wait a minute, my data is just not ready. And so, we've had to spend a lot of time internally just working to make sure that we have the right data formatted, we have the right tools to access that data and also to manage that data, because not all data is good data, right? So how old is that data? Who is the author of that data? Is it still valid? And this use case is still accurate? And so there's a lot of underneath the hood stuff that companies have to do and that we're working with ourselves before they can fully take advantage of it. I think the companies that do that now and invest in that time and resource now will be much further ahead when they flip the switch.
Well, two things. You're right, data, garbage in, garbage out. And two, it does have to be an investment. And this is partly where I think companies that are a little bit lagging in really taking a serious look at AI, that's where they're really going to shoot themselves in the foot because it is going to take that upfront investment. This is probably, since the Industrial Revolution, this is the largest investment that companies are going to be needing to make very soon as far as adopting and utilizing AI. And a lot of that may be data preparation, a lot of that may be other infrastructure elements, but it definitely is an investment that cannot be skipped over. So let me ask you a different question then. I referred to the hype previously. What are you recognizing that seems to be just hype? What is it that you think is not real? I'm curious as to your perspective.
Yeah, maybe this is not what you're expecting, but I happen to believe that AI is real, and I think it's real in a lot of use cases. And I think computer vision to sensor data to large language models to robotic infrastructure and so forth. I think all of those things are real. I think where the hype is that people are thinking that they can just like pull it off the shelf and buy it and turn it on.
Yeah.
And I think that off the shelf, ready-made AI transformation is the hype, right? And we're just not there yet. And I think we're going to get there where more and more things are off the shelf, but we're just not there today. And I was on a call earlier with a leader of a big CX company, and he and I were both at Cisco at the same time, and we both got to work with Jeffrey Moore, and we were sharing how we really enjoyed that experience. And 1980 something, he came up with, or maybe in the 70s, he came up with the technology adoption curve that we all know if you've been around, and you got early adopters, you got kind of the main market, you got laggards, and everybody kind of knows where that is. But he identified that in the early days of early adopters, there's this chasm that if you zoom in very, very close in that curve, you can see where technologies go and die because they didn't have the whole product to really prop them up to make them successful. And I think that's the phase we're in with AI today is we're not even up the full early adopter cycle. We're still in the early part of that where we need partners, we need the whole product, we need services, we need a lot of things around it to really make that project successful. And it's not just, plug and play. So that's the hype I would say exists today.
Interesting. That's a great perspective. One of the analogies that I used a lot in many of my presentations was AI is the new electricity. And I've been saying this for years, and it's just becoming more and more true that AI is the electricity that's going to power the things. All of these different specific packageable, productizable use cases or tools, that's like, okay, we've got power piped to the kitchen. Now what? We got to wait for someone to invent the refrigerator. We got to wait for someone to invent the toaster.
Yeah,
We got to
right.
wait for someone to invent the blender. That's what we're waiting on. But in the meantime, people need to at least start getting the power to the kitchen and putting the outlets in place so that when these things are there and usable, that you can actually plug in and get going. So,
Yeah, and the way that you plumb that house may be completely different with
yeah,
AI than it was before, because I think part of the challenges we have as people, and why partners, I'm really excited about the role partners can play in this. We have this view that A goes to B to C to D, and then you get there, but with AI and the tool sets, maybe you might go A to D, and you don't need B and C at all anymore because you're able to go right to D with that result. And so it's going to take some creativity and some first principle thinking that I think is going to challenge and create great opportunity for leaders and in their company and partner community to find those innovative ways to connect those.
I agree. Anything you're scared of right now?
I mean, the big macro things, right? Like, let's say we all do get a robot and turn it on and we're all super productive. What does that economy look like, right? I don't think that economy's even been invented yet, and how that would work and how we would interact with an economy that has that kind of productivity or has that kind of ability. So, that keeps me up at night. I want to make sure that we're thinking about that. But I'm also an optimistic, right? I'm a tech optimist, which I think is obvious if you're listening to this. The fact that you can give people who are paraplegic a whole new way to communicate with the world around them and interact with the physical world, and be more productive and be more self-sufficient, and even and be able to contribute in a way that they may have currently unable to contribute, right? Is That's exciting, right? Because I think there are a lot of barriers for folks that are disabled that these technologies are going to unlock, and it's going to create great new opportunities for a lot of folks who have been held back. So there's kind of really both sides of that equation that excite me, and certainly I want to think about more.
Yeah, I'm with you. The socioeconomic impacts of AI are pretty formidable. You're looking at some serious, potentially chaos.
Yeah.
But there's probably a lot that we're underestimating too. So, AI, okay, well, we've already up to this point underestimated the rapidity in which innovation was going to happen and things were going to get better. We look at the phenomenon of the LLM when ChatGPT 3.5 was introduced to now, it's night and day. It's crazy the differences and the improvements that have been made. What do you think is going to happen in the next few years? Is there anything that we're underestimating?
I think that, I mean, there are definitely a lot of people talking about it for sure, but I think people are still thinking of LLMs as this chat box that you're going to always talk to, and it's not, right? I mean, if you think about, again, the robot example we're talking about, a humanoid robot interfacing with the world is going to use an LLM to interpret all of that data coming in, and understand it and make decisions and respond and react to that data. That's still going to be an LLM in some way, right? It's not a chatbot, right? It's much larger than that. You think of the agentic opportunity that is coming fast and furious when it comes to customer service resources, or telemarketing resources, or tech support resources, or order processing and management resource, like all these things that agentic agents can solve and work for, right? That's not a chatbot, but that's built on large language models, right? So I think it's getting people's mind, beyond the chat box to what really this technology can power.
Speaking of LLMs, I'm curious. What is your chosen LLM? What do you like to use the most?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly try them all on a regular basis. From OpenAI to XAI, which I think people sleep on and aren't realizing the progress and leaps and bounds and improvements that Elon's making with that platform. But my go-to is Gemini. I love Google's deep research, which is something they've always really been good at, right? And something they've really invented with DeepMind. And, I'm a huge fan of Notebook LM. I just love that product, to be able to take a bunch of sources and load it up there, and create a podcast that are just like this, that are amazing and thoughtful, to analysis and infographics and all kinds of stuff. I mean, very fortunate that ScanSource allowed me to do a very robust executive physical where I did a bunch of heart CT scans and ultrasounds and different tests and all kinds of stuff just to make sure that I'm still going to be kicking next year. And, I took all that data, blood work, genetic data, heart data, all that stuff, and all the supplements that I take personally. I took my Hume body scan that I have at home, my weight body scan tool, again, all the supplements and vitamins and any medicine I take, and I put all that in Notebook LM, and I created, Ken's health notebook, and I asked, like, are there any interactions with these medicines and supplements? Because are there any supplements I should be taking that I'm not taking? Should I be taking maybe different ones? Should I be taking different doses? Should I change the times? Should I change the mix? Like some I take in the morning, some I take at night. Should I mix it up differently? So I actually asked a whole bunch of questions and got a bunch of great answers. I created a podcast that read it all to me, talked about my health data in a way that I could understand. And then when I went to do the final physical with my doctor, I literally handed her an infographic that was created by Notebook LM that literally took all the data and organized it in a very concise. She put it in my chart. She's like, "This is amazing."
Oh, that's amazing.
Slapped it in my chart, and then she looked at all the things, the medicine, and she's like, this makes sense. And so we were able to have a much more thoughtful conversation because of the way that Notebook LM was able to leverage those many different sources of data. Some were pictures, some were uploads, some were whatever, and really get real value out of it. And that just changes the game for putting more power back in the individual. And I just think Gemini does that better than most. So that's my preferred one.
Very impressive. I agree with you. Gemini is certainly very powerful. And I also agree with you that XAI is making some great inroads. But Grok, man, that dude's got an attitude. I mean,
Elon's always Eloning, right? I mean, he's going to do his thing. He's going to put his style on it, and certainly makes it more interesting.
Definitely does. Well, one of the things I like to ask people that are on the podcast as I come to the end of the time, and thank you for spending the time today. I really appreciate it, Ken. But one of the things I like to ask is, if you are in an advisory space for a company that is hesitant and is a little bit scared on how to start diving into AI, and this could even translate to individuals. I don't know. It could be a person, could be a company. But if someone is just getting started with AI, what do they do? Where do they start? What is your recommendation to start building that knowledge and that aptitude with AI?
First, you have to really create a style of curiosity, right? You've got to be curious and say, well, what could I do with this data, or what questions could I answer, what insight could I gather? So really, first, just being curious about all the data you have, and then start asking questions. And writing those questions down and saying, do I have the data today? Is it organized correctly today? Where am I at? And you'll find that there's some gaps for sure. And then start working with an AI advisor that can help you really understand what's going on, right? Like, do an analysis of where you are today, where you want to go, and what outcomes you want to be. Like any other big project, AI is no different. But I think what's unique about AI is it's not again, ABC. It can be A to Z, it can be Z to A. So you just have to be curious, and you have to be, and you have to be really adaptable to what you may not see as something that jumps out at you, and be open to a different route, and then just work with an advisor and get a platform and start, right, and then be okay to fail. I think a lot of POCs are going to fail. I think there's lots of data out there that's has different numbers. Certainly I'm not the expert on it, but I think a lot of POCs are going to fail, and that's okay. Right. And we did one internally, and everybody's like, "Oh no, it failed." I was like, hold on. What did we learn in this failure that we didn't know before it failed? Like, here's all the things that we learned that now when we go to the next phase, we already know all these things. We already learned all these things. So, don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to fail a lot. And don't give up. That would be the final recommendation.
And there you have it. Thanks for joining us on AI Diatribe. If Ken's insights on AI readiness and real-world implementation resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more conversations with industry leaders who are actually deploying AI solutions. Have questions or want to connect? Reach out to us at contact@aidiatribe.com. We'd love to hear about your AI journey or discuss speaking opportunities. So until next time, remember, The robots are coming, but preparation beats panic. See you next episode.